So let's run through how the release actually looks like. I'll be using the 11.8 release issue. Actually, it might be easier to just share the screen and you can follow along there. Okay, so the docs that I linked to earlier say how you can start the release issue, but basically we've implemented a chatops command basically that allows you to start the whole process by running a command, and that command is like chatops run prepare and then the issue number basically, and then it opens this automatically generated issue template here. So you can find that issue template actually in the release tools. So release tools is a bunch of Ruby scripts. Basically, it's one big rake file that you can trigger all these different commands with. And this is actually hooked into chatops. So chatops will clone release tools and then run the rake command to do certain things. So all of these templates that you will be seeing that are automatically generated, they are all going to be in templates. I think, yeah, in all of these templates. So, for example, monthly issue is this, and that's the actual issue we are looking at. Now we are trying to remove as much as possible of these items, but this is, if you could believe it, this is already progress compared to what we had. There are a bunch of manual actions here that I'm not going to necessarily go into, but we create currently stable branches out of master. And those branches are going to be our code freeze branches, right? So they are going to be slower. They're going to be moving slower than master. So master is unlocked in all of our projects so that people can submit fixes there. But when we are ready to start preparing the release, we branch off the master, and that branch now starts receiving specific fixes and so on, so no new features get merged into it. We are starting a bit early, but when the code freeze gets announced on the 7th, then those branches will receive no other updates, basically. Now, this actually only mentions CE, EE, and Omnibus, but there are a number of other repositories that GitLab uses. So if we, for example, go to 11.8 stable branch for community edition, all of these different components have version files inside of the repository. So that's the first difference that you'll see between different components of GitLab. So basically, community edition and enterprise edition are being used as this big overarching repository for all of the other items that are necessary. This is mostly historical. It has nothing to do with actual architecting, how this looks. It's more like, oh, well, we added another component. What do we do with it? We'll create a version file in it. And this version file only contains a tag, right? So that kind of says that for GitLab 11.8, the GitLab workhorse version is going to be 830.
Yeah.
For example, right? Now, Omnibus, if you go to Omnibus, for example, Omnibus follows the same process there, where we are having stable branches named the same. But then, okay, let me not go into this right now because it's going to confuse you from the start. Basically, this is what you need to know. CE, EE, and Omnibus have 11-8 stable branches. EE has -EE at the end, and Omnibus has both EE and CE. So 11.8 stable, 11.8 stable EE in them. Um, so multiple other things here. I think what's important to note is all of our development is happening on gitlab.com. That part you do know. But all of our release, so building the actual release, happens on dev.gitlab.org. So between those projects, we have a mirror set up that automatically mirrors everything, basically, master, protected branches, everything. So in normal circumstances, when we have just a regular release, this means that all of these satellite repositories will automatically should be automatically mirrored to dev, from which we are going to be pulling. But sometimes these things break down. So at the moment when we want to tag a release, the build will fail because of one of these components doesn't have tags pushed. These days it's happening very rarely, honestly, but it used to happen fairly frequent. And this is why this section here was added. I think this should be now removed because most of the time we are fine. So one release, this is 11.8, will have multiple RCs. So you know that we are targeting to deploy basically daily. Well, our daily deploy starting from the 7th is basically an RC. It's a release candidate. I don't like the name that people usually, or rather the expectation that people usually attach to something that's called release candidate. But to me, it's actually just that. It's a release candidate. So if we were to say RC1 is our package that we want to deliver on the 22nd, that should be possible to do. So RC doesn't show instability, it should actually show stability, which I think not many people follow. So from here on, again, we have multiple issues created for release candidates. All of them have guidelines. But let me see if this issue was created already. It was. So release RC1 issue. We use a system called preparation branches, right? So at any point in time, whatever we want to merge into the stable branch, it first goes into a preparation branch, which allows us to merge all of the different, to cherry pick all of the different items people need to ship in a release. We don't do this automatically inside of the stable branch because that could interfere possibly with an ongoing release. This way we can prepare multiple releases at the same time. So say we have 11.8.1, which is a security release, and 11.8.2, which is a stable release. So while the security release is being prepared, we don't want to merge stable stuff into it because we don't want to mix the two. Again, for historical reasons, I don't think there is a real reason behind it. But this way, it allows us to have pipelines that are going to run, ensure that we know what we are actually picking. And once everything is ready, then it's just clicking a merge button and it will go into the stable branch and we can then tag a release. All right, this is just the structure. Now let's say we clicked on that merge button. No, actually, no. I think we are too far away from clicking that merge button. I think what's important here to note is, let me go back to the original issue. Okay, this label, pick into 11.8. So for each release, we have this specific label called pick into. And when we announce the feature freeze on the 7th, every merge request that people want to target stable branches with needs to have this label applied. Otherwise, we have no way of knowing this, right? Like people apply a milestone. We used to just apply a milestone, but that didn't actually show urgency, right? Like it showed that maybe someone forgot to finish it off before before the feature freeze was there. So pick into means, okay, I actually need, I'm actually aware that I missed the code freeze day or feature freeze day. Now I need to apply this label. So I really want this to go in the release.
Gotcha.
When the feature freeze gets announced, we go into this exception request situation. Now, why is this important? Well, because previously people would just randomly apply the label and merge things that could potentially cause problems for us, which happened multiple times at the beginning of 2018. So to prevent people from just randomly merging code, we created this thing called exception request, and let me go there and show you that. So it's in the release tasks repository. I'll open one of the previous ones. So when the code freeze happens, or when the feature freeze gets announced, and the merge request is not merged in time, we expect people to, create an exception request. And this actually makes me really happy because you barely can see any these days. Mostly because people are so tired of creating them. I'm not kidding. So what I actually created with this template is there is a clear process, right? You need to link to the merge request. You can see it here. Why do you want to pick this, right? Like you had the time. So explanation of what actually happens and why is it important to pick this in. So in some cases, people miss the delivery by 1 day, or there was something difficult to do, or extra testing needed to be done. And we promise something to the customer and we need to ship it, right? So this is where the explanation goes. But the second item, potential negative impact of picking, is something that people spend most time on. So this request is explain, if we merge this, explain what is the worst case scenario that can happen in case we accept this change. So I just merged something. The worst case scenario is we will no longer have merge request button, so that we as a release managers can decide, wait, is this really worth the risk? So we might need to ask additional questions. Actually, you really want to risk this? And what are the actual, what actual tools do you have to prevent this from happening? Do you have a feature flag? Do you have something to control this? Because if this ends up on GitLab.com and it affects all of our users, then all of a sudden, infrastructure team needs to figure out how to rectify this problem. So this is why this section was created. People explain, right? Like it can be this, it can be that, but most of the time, it's a pretty decent explanation explaining, right? Like this is the impact, and I'm aware of the impact. So it kind of shows us as well that someone actually thought through the item. And then obviously there are a bunch of approvals. So at any point, it's at release manager's discretion to just say no, but not just to say no, but explain why am I saying no. Maybe there are multiple releases going on at the same time, so it's not possible to do another release, or the possible danger of merging this is too high, and I don't want to risk it because that will block 5 other things that are happening at the same time, right? And obviously after that, it's approvals from different leads.
Yeah. So you have this form for exceptions. Why don't we have a form that's similar for everything that we choose to pick into a release?
Because that would mean too much time spent on process. And we say that you have a blanket merge option, right? Like we then depend on process and so on to have everything done by the 7th. What happens on the 7th is that we have a very fixed due dates, right? from the 7th till the 22nd, we need to do so many items, so many things in so many environments, so many checks need to be executed. So if we didn't have this, or if we had this for everything, someone would constantly have to write this up and have approvals for this. This is not where we want to go. Ideally, what we want to have is not even have a feature freeze, but just have environments and enough steps in between, enough tools to provide to developers so they don't have to actually do any of this. I would love to remove the exception request. It did its job, but I'm annoyed with it that I even had to create something like this.
So this was created strictly for the purpose of slowing people down and preventing mistakes.
Yes.
When we pass the deadline of the 7th.
Correct.
Gotcha.
So exactly 1 year ago, we didn't have this. When I introduced this a year ago, we had quite a lot of exception requests created, quite a lot of annoyed people. But with time, they started to learn why this is being asked. And now we actually only have maybe like 2 or 3 exceptions requests per release, which is great, which means people are actually thinking like, oh, maybe this is not really that urgent. Do I really want to like introduce this risk and derail the whole process? Well, let me think twice. One exception to the, that's also what we introduce. One exception to the whole exception request process is if you have something between feature flag, we allow you to merge things or to ship this in a release up to 19th, I think.
Okay.
Because the feature flag is a way for us to control the impact on GitLab.com. I don't want to block people from using a feature. I just want to have a way of us deploying and like seeing something bad happen and us like flipping the switch and saying, okay, well, at least we are now have the old behavior while you figure out why this is happening so that we don't affect people. So that's one of the exception to the exception request rule. If you have a feature flag, you're good to go. You just need to assign this, or rather assign this pick into label and say in an issue, say this is behind feature flag. So no exception request needed.
And I guess the same applies for regression or issues that are tagged as regressions as well?
Regressions for this release, so anything that got introduced now, they automatically get merged in. Yes, correct.
Okay.
Everything that is an old regression, which would mean it's a bug, that needs to go through exception request as well.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay. This is the process. So now release managers decided to merge something. I think you saw that we have automated cherry picker now these days. Let me see.
Yes, I did see that somewhere.
So previously, someone had to do this shit manually. Every single, like you would have to go through 15, 20 merge requests and cherry pick each and every one of them. Thanks to Robert, we now have the cherry picker. I don't know where this one is. Yeah, there we go. So it would just pick up all the merge requests that are vetted by release managers. So like a release manager went through the list of merge requests, labels are correctly set, milestones are correctly set, assignees, merged, blah, 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 all of that is correctly set. Now that we vetted that everything is fine, we run this cherry picker and it will just pick everything into prepare branches and so on, right?
So prior to cherry picking, a release manager needs to go through all of the proposed MRs?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But not go into detail, but just go into whether this belongs there or not. So this is a visual confirmation that all the labels are correct. So if someone applied, regression, it's not your job to go and like understand, oh, is this a regression or not, right? Like we need to trust someone at some point, obviously. But in certain cases, not anymore, but at the beginning, this was people who just randomly apply labels. So we need to understand, wait, is this a feature? Why? Okay, if this is a feature, it looks like a feature. It doesn't have any sort of label that is a regression. It doesn't have an exception request. It doesn't look like it has a feature flag. why is this merge request here, right? So this is the visual confirmation we are doing. Okay, now here is a twist here a bit. So you need to do these things for, like the cherry picker does this automatically for both CE and EE, right? You don't need to run it twice. So you have these two preparation branches populated. The thing is, we need to make sure that CE branch or the CE preparation branch is merged into EE as well.
Yeah.
Because we have this CE to EE merge. Most of the time, that creates some conflicts. It delays the process or so on. And that, at that point, you need to start chasing developers to help out with merging conflicts. This is one of the reasons why we are pushing hard towards merging these code bases. They are the same code base, just not completely the same. And that creates all of these additional requirements, all of this additional time that is necessary for the pipelines to pass, for people to invest time in resolving conflicts, and so on and so on. Okay, so now let's say all the preparation branches have been merged correctly, pipelines are green, we are ready. So when that happens, we need to ensure that anything that might be in Omnibus GitLab that has the same picking to stable branch is merged, right? That gets merged into the stable branches in Omnibus. And when that is ready, I don't know why they call it packaging these days, but we say that we have a situation clear for release, for tagging, which means all the Omnibus stable branches are ready. All the CE and EE branches have the fixes also merged into their stable branches. And now it's time to tag.
Yeah.
When you run this command, chatops run tag, we utilize the release tools project. So what happens in the background is that chatops clones this repository and runs a bunch of Ruby code that is written in this repository. Okay, hold on to your butts. What that actually does is, inside of CI, release tools will clone all of the projects. So it will clone Omnibus, it will clone GitLab CE, it will clone GitLab EE.
Yeah.
It will tag on top of the stable branch, it will tag the release. It will tag the release on top of the EE stable branch, right? So the version file of GitLab CE, let me go quickly here. So as I said, there are various version files here. When the release tools tags a version, it will update this version file, and it will say 1180 RC1.
Yeah.
All of these other version files will be then a snapshot in time for that specific RC version. This is done in CE and this is done in EE. And now in Omnibus GitLab, it will clone Omnibus GitLab as well. And then it will update, automatically commit and update all these version files here.
Okay.
So,
and those theoretically match their corresponding branch for GitLab EE or CE. Correct.
It's not going to be theoretical. It's going to be exactly that one, right? This is why we are doing it in one pipeline as well, to ensure that there is no desyncing. So these versions are exactly the same for the specific version as the one in GitLab EE and CE. Right now, if I open one of these, because we are on the master branch, it points to master, right? But if we select any of these ones,
that would match the EE version.
Now it's not matching because this is a new branch, but once we tag, this is gonna match the version. So if I show you 11.7 stable, for example, the previous release, see, like this
Yeah.
one should now match the exact version we have in CE.
Gotcha.
This is done because Omnibus GitLab then needs to pull all of these dependencies from dev.gitlab.org and clone them so it can actually build the package.
Yeah.
Right? So Omnibus then runs the build. Let me show you one of the builds, I guess. Let's use this one. So this is the pipeline that gets created when you tag. To run you quickly through the pipeline, we build actual assets, so JavaScript, CSS, all of those files. We actually build them in the CE and in the EE builds. So it's separate, in separate repositories, right? And in order to not, like we've been doing asset building in like multiple other places. So for example, in Omnibus and in GitLab Helm charts and so on. So in order to avoid like doing this 4 or 5 times, we build the assets inside of the original pipeline and then just fetch the assets from the other pipelines to be reused in building the package.
Makes sense.
In this first stage, we built the package that is going to be used for public consumption, but we build it first because we want to deploy it to staging. So if you use Ubuntu 16.04, that means that's the package that is currently extracted. And at the same time, we build another Docker image for QA. When the package is built, so you can see here, the build is completely done, uploaded, cache is uploaded, and so on. We use a separate job that goes and uploads the package to Package Cloud. And it also triggers a takeoff, or it's called takeoff, you should rename it. It triggers a deploy, right? So it now goes to, I think, the deployer on ops.gitlab.net. Yeah, I don't have it in shortcuts, so let me see if I can find it here.
The fourth one down?
Yeah. So now this pipeline is going to be triggered. We call this a staging process, basically. So basically, first of all, the package is built and pushed to a staging repository on Package Cloud. So this repository is not public. It's private, and it's used across our infrastructure. And I don't know whether this is the one, but I think this is the one possibly.
Not if it has my name in it.
Yeah, there we go. We'll use this as an example. It doesn't matter at all. Basically, the same pipeline is going to be triggered, right? The same one that will do a bunch of preparation tasks, run the migrations or staging, deploy Gitly, deploy to the rest of the fleet, run the post-deploy migrations, and do some cleanup, and then fire off GitLab QA against staging. So all of this is now automatically done. So from the moment you actually tag a release, you will have a deploy done on staging.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see if I can find a better pipeline, better example of a pipeline.
We should tag our deploys. Like a bunch of these are not related to the deploy, but more like testing CI.
Yeah, I know, but priorities, you know, like I want to get rid of all of these manual tasks first before I go and make this prettier. So I think this one is probably the staging one. Yeah, this was the staging one. So it's the same one as you used previously, basically. So this runs the smoke tests,
Yeah.
right? If this fails, then we know something is up and we don't want to progress further. If it succeeds like it did now, then we are fine with going further. So now that we had deployed, right? This is no longer needed. I don't know. Why do we have this? That needs to be removed. So now you create a QA issue. Now this is a manual task. So the QA issue is again there as a measure to prevent something that we had like a year ago where we would just go and deploy to staging, no one would care, no one would touch it, and then we would go and deploy to production and people would start getting annoyed because stuff is broken.
Yeah.
Now, because of that reason, we have a manual QA task. So yes, we have automated one, but there are new features that are being added that don't have automated QA tests. So this is the automatically generated manual QA issue. What it does is, so this is for 11.7.5, but it's the same for any, it doesn't matter, we run the same task.
Yeah.
What it does, it actually pings the people who merged this, picks up all of the labels that one had, and expects, like in the process, we say that we expect everyone who is tagged here to either nominate someone or manually verify that what they merged is working, actually working on staging.
Goodness. Okay.
And this is nothing, like you should see the first RC issue. Nightmare. But shockingly, right, like we are going to remove this. I can't wait for this to be removed. But this has helped us out so many times in the past year. We found so many actual regressions that would be critical in production on staging, just because we pinged someone, hey, can you check this?
Yeah.
Right? So we have a deadline for this, and deadline usually expires and people don't check off all of the items. But people usually do also check out items, and that helps us out. Anyway, people leave a comment, manual QA is done, and when someone finds a regression, they ping the release managers.
Yeah.
It's kind of difficult to explain to people what is a critical regression and what is a regression. Mm-hmm. So it's up to the release manager to ask questions and say like, wait, okay, well, this pixel is misaligned. I don't think this is a crucial regression. I'm going to deploy. Oh, yeah. You can see a half of the merge request interface. That's actually a critical regression, right? Like, I don't want to deploy that. So yeah. This is where some decisions can be additionally made. Okay, so say QA deadline expired or everyone checked off their items. Then we go to deploy to Canary, right? So chatops command, you saw the pipeline, it's the same thing. It's not this one, it's the other one. So this is staging, so the other one, the jar just ran on master. So now that we actually have, so this one I think is the one he deployed just now. It's literally the same as staging, right?
Yeah, it's just a different fleet of servers.
Different fleet of servers, exactly. It executes QA again and so on. Now that we actually have more eyes on Canary and that people don't have an option, as in they have an option to opt out, not to opt in. Now I expect way more valuable feedback from Canary. And this has already started happening, which I'm quite happy about. But we also kind of leave Canary for a bit, right? Like, okay, you deploy Canary, everything like new version is up. You go and do some work. There is no deadline that we set. But basically, we kind of give it some time so that people can actually have a chance to catch regressions. Yeah. And then the other process basically says, once everything is fine, there are no Canary errors, Canary dashboard looks normal, all of that is fine, we can then go and decide to deploy to production.
Gotcha.
Deploy to production is, you know how it's done. Basically, it's the same thing. You just use -- production for the ChatOps deploy. And because we run all the migrations, not all, but online migrations inside of Canary, now production deploys are mostly boring, I would say. Sometimes the number of alerts goes off, like that sometimes happens because of the post-deploy migrations that work on large data set and some cleanups, but that's usually fine. When the production deploy happens, there are no critical alerts or anything like that. We then go and publish the packages. So all up until now, all of these packages are standing in the private package cloud repository. Nothing is released to public. At the moment you run this command, the pipeline in Omnibus has, do I have it here? Is it ChatOps? No, I don't have it. It doesn't matter. Pipeline in Omnibus, well, it does matter. If I'm showing you already, why don't I show you the whole thing then? Lazy, I'm being lazy. This is why you see like there is like a bunch of jobs in the pipeline of Omnibus. So up until this moment here, right? Package and image. Up until this moment here, still everything is private. So this was the one that actually triggered the deploy to staging. This one continued to work in parallel. So it built all the packages for the versions that we are shipping. No, actually up until here, sorry. So this one is actually building the packages. And this one is actually uploading the packages to Package Cloud. It's separate.
Gotcha.
The reason why they are separate, they used to be like all in like one, send to S6 and upload would be the same. If the only reason why the job failed is the package failed to upload and you need to retry it, you would have to wait for the whole package to build again. So by separating this, we ensure that you can independently, right? Oh, package built, let me retry. Oh, package built, but the upload failed. Okay, let me retry package upload. So
makes sense
for our mistakes, right?
Yeah.
Okay, this job is not really that important for the release process. But anyway, you see all of these manual jobs here, right? All of those jobs here are basically promotion to public. What it actually does, it uploads the same package, it uploads it now to a public repository. And by running ChatOps run publish, the only thing it will do is it will just trigger all of these manual jobs.
Gotcha.
All of them that you see here. And that will publicize the release, and people will be able to fetch the Docker images or packages and so on.
Okay.
And with that is the whole release process.
Sounds easy. You made it sound like it's the easiest thing to do in this company. Yep. It's super easy, unless the pipelines fail, unless the build fails somewhere, unless runners are not operating correctly on dev, or there is a contention in between. I don't know, like multiple builds you're running at the same time. I think the trickiest part at the moment, like all of this automation is done in the past year, 2 years, actually a lot of it in the past year. So all of the automated stuff, like, oh, this pipeline now triggers this pipeline. This was done recently. All of that you had to do manually previously, right? Not even ChatOps, manually. We didn't have a ChatOps command for this. So comparing 11.8 with December of 2017 or January 2018 is night and day comparison. But that still doesn't mean that we don't have problems. So the biggest problem, I would say, is the manual decisions you need to make, right? Oh, which items do I pick? Or, okay, now I need to wait for the pipelines to finish. Oh, okay, this one flaky test failed in the whole CE pipeline. Let's retry. Oh, no, it's not actually flaky. It's actually a valid failure. Now go to developers and figure out what the hell is happening. Can someone help me with this task? Rerun again. Oh, okay, it failed again, so it's really a failed test. You need to fix this. So now, oh, there is a merge request to fix this failure. Now you need to port it to CE and EE and then rerun everything again. And
perfect. Do we have guidelines for various types of those scenarios?
I don't know, honestly. I guess the best question would be to ask Alex and Jarv, who were, I think, the first ones who were non-development personnel doing this.
Okay.
So I think they needed to figure this out, and I don't know whether they picked it up just by sheer getting the help from others, or we have something written down. But a lot of these things are actually written down in the process document or in the individual docs in the release. But when I run you through the process right now, like it's a bit easier to see how this all works. What's important to note here is that we are working on gitlab.com. We are building on dev.gitlab.org, and we are doing operations commands from ops.gitlab.net. What can go wrong, right? Like any of these can actually fail at any point for whatever reasons. And then figuring out that is actually the biggest concern and problem. So by actually removing some of these manual steps of deployment, we made this so much easier for all of us. But then now we need to figure out how to have the automated deploy actually react properly on alerting. On, you know, like, oh, something is actually happening while I'm deploying. Okay, what do I do? Oh, let me inform the operator who should be monitoring me, right? Like when you trigger a ChatOps command, you go and do other things and you wait for the notification to come up. And I think like all of the slowest and the most painful parts are still remaining inside of the development side. Less so in the infrastructure side. In the infrastructure side, sadly, we just kind of, you know, glued things together. I wouldn't say this is terrible. It's not actually that terrible. I think the tooling we're using is pretty decent, but it can be done way better with way more. We're shorter, right? You saw how, like, I took you from pipeline to pipeline. There is no reason why GitLab CE should be starting point. GitLab CE is one component. There is an issue in the framework issue tracker. I think you might, let me find it quickly. So this proposal for reordering release pipelines, like, you can imagine that all of these things kind of grew organically as we were getting new features, as we were adding new components and all of that. It was, okay, we need to make this work for the current situation. When creating all of this started, we only had GitLab CE to start with. Then we had the GitLab EE. Then all of a sudden, both of them started getting, oh, we have GitLab Shell. GitLab Shell was the only component that we used outside of GitLab Rails. But then we added Workhorse. Then we added pages, then we added registry, then we added all of these. And this is why you have all these version files inside of Rails, because we grew. Like, oh, well, we have a system that works for one, why don't we use it for 5 other things? Right? And right now, everything starts from a manual task, which I want to try and turn around. I want to ensure that we are actually asking for a deploy, not for a version. You want to deploy, and then you want to create an artifact for that deploy. So this is the graph you're seeing here. And then the release tooling will do a bunch of other things like, you know, prepare everything, prepare for cherry picking, cherry pick, and so on. And then you will package omnibus package, you will package charts, you will package 5 other things that we are going to introduce at some point. And that is going to like come back and say, okay, well, here is the deploy artifact. You can go and deploy. I'm going to go and do all of my other things, right? I'll prepare all the separate artifacts that are necessary for public release, right?
Yeah.
So GitLab.com receives its thing as it's necessary, but then the rest of the process continues for public release. But this, in order for this to happen, we are probably going to have to do a lot of refactoring in a lot of places, and I don't know whether this is going to happen that quickly. But hey, we can start somewhere. All right, so now that you've seen all of this, do you have any questions or anything from the docs you are missing in this explanation?
I think what I'm going to do is roll through the docs and maybe use the documentation as a method for me to regurgitate what you stated and see if I could update any documentation.
Perfect.
And or gather the questions necessary from either a conflict of the documentation between what you stated and what just needs to be updated, and go from there probably.
Yep.
I think one question I would have is it's a low priority question. Why do we build things on dev? Why don't we carry that over to GitLab.com? I understand why we deploy from a different instance, but how can we still build on the dev instance?
So GitLab.com actually uses Omnibus installer to install there, right? Dev.gitlab.org is a separate instance from GitLab.com. And just building this separately on dev.gitlab.org allows us to be completely independent from any sort of problems that GitLab.com might have. All the mirrored repositories, all the images, all of that is on dev. So it's basically just a question of building that artifact that GitLab.com can use later. Yeah. If your follow-up question is, why are we not doing this on ops? Ops is an ops instance, right? Operations instance. It was created fairly recently. And I don't think that there is a use case at the moment for migrating all of this process to ops, because dev.gitlab.org serves the same purpose at the moment. So basically, the only reason why this is completely separate is we can't have GitLab.com build the artifact that it uses for deploying itself.
Makes sense.
Create too many problems.
My thought behind that question was more along the lines of, if we're trying to remove development from the dev instance, I was wondering if we could eliminate other things that the dev instance accomplishes as a way of forcing us to just get rid of it completely. I know that's not the end goal, but that would kind of, help. I'm thinking of other ways to help security, get behind the fact that we need to get rid of that process or that instance in general.
Yep. So removing development would be one huge push in that direction.
Yeah.
Right. Building, it doesn't really matter whether it happens on dev.gitlab.org or ops.gitlab.net. It totally does not matter.
Yeah.
Right. So it would be us replacing endpoints there. It would be a bit painful, but it would be doable. Yeah. I think one other thing that dev.gitlab.org does is it serves as an OAuth basically for license, for version, for all those external services. So whether that's also easily doable or not, that's a different question.
Yeah.
But I think moving development would be the biggest item, because we do need a place where we will do security vulnerability fixes. A private one, it can't happen in public, right? So whether that's dev.gitlab.org or gitlab.com private projects, groups, I don't think it actually matters. I think we would prefer gitlab.com because you get all these great things like automatic linking of issues as soon as you mention them. So
that's been my greatest frustration with us using the ops instance, is that all of our work is tracked elsewhere, so we just lose visibility into what is actually happening.
Exactly. Exactly. And this is where all of the confusion in security releases comes from. Just that switches between the, like, at least for the work you do on GitLab.com. So yes, you lose some of it on ops, but it's not that big of a deal. Imagine doing the whole of development on a separate instance, without labels, without milestones, without, it's a mess. You know, this is why the pushes happen.
Okay. Are there any other immediate items that you could determine that we could potentially automate that we don't currently today? Or do we have issues for all those potentials already open?
We have issues for all of those. If you take a look at the framework issue tracker, let me again share my screen and do this. Label, then release toil. All of these items, 21 of them, are things that we want to completely remove from the process or automate.
Yeah.
A lot of the items in there are just because we had release managers previously, which was a rotating role. So you would add, well, someone forgot to do X, so let's add it to the template so that we don't forget it again. You know,
Gotcha.
And that kind of grew out of control, and it was, oh, we added this component, so let's do something with it. Okay, well, it's release manager, it's someone else's problem, right? With automation and you know, questioning what is necessary and what is not necessary anymore, I think all of these 21 issues will remove maybe even half, if not like 80% of what you see in preparation issue.
Okay.
So yeah, check out some of, like, if you're going to rewatch this recording and reread the release docs, check out some of these issues. Maybe some of the changes you're going to submit to documentation and to the templates will allow us to close some of these issues.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Cool. So for example, what I'm seeing right now, synchronizing branches, like that shouldn't be done manually. Like that can be easily done automatically, but we haven't had the time to do that. So
that and the merging of CE into EE.
That's already automated, but partially. So it is automated for master, but it's not automated for stable branches.
Yeah.
And we decided to not go down the route of improving that workflow because we keep investing this time into that workflow and it makes no sense. And everyone feels the pain of separate code bases. And this is why we went down the CE code base merge. To not have to invest more time in custom tooling.
Yeah. Okay. I had a question.
Yeah.
I don't know how to phrase this question because I'm not really sure what I'm looking for out of this. But we create a branch off of some previous commit at some point in time, and we label it 11.8 stable, whatever. And then we pluck things from master. We cherry pick things from master into that branch.
Correct.
What governs what starts the stable branch?
So 7th of the month is the time when we are supposed to start the stable branch.
Okay.
So the feature freeze actually governs when the stable branch is created. Now, in the past 6 months or a bit more, I've been pushing that that line gets blurred on purpose because I want to remove feature freeze. I don't care for feature freeze. I don't think it's good for the velocity of our development.
So you're trying to slowly push that forward closer to the 22nd, I guess?
Correct. Yeah. What we did was we actually pushed the stable branch, or rather creation of the stable branch sooner, right? Not later, but sooner.
Yeah.
So that because we have this deploy cycle that we have right now, we would create a stable branch and the first RC on the first of the month and deploy that on staging right away, so that people can test it earlier, so that by the time the code freeze comes, we already have something deployed to gitlab.com. And then the delta becomes smaller and smaller as you go further, right? And then by the time you deploy RC10, the RC10 is minor, right? Like it doesn't have that many fixes. It's just like crucial fixes or annoying fixes or something like that. Yeah.
So what determines, actually, wait, before I get back to that, what is the parent commit when a stable branch gets created?
What do you mean, what is the parent commit? It's just
like it's not off of the master branch. It's off of like the previous release.
No. It's off the master branch. So the parent commit is always from master when you're creating the initial stable branch. So this is why we have the cherry picking process as well, right? Like everything goes into master exclusively, and then you port things into stable branch, which is slower, right? Like it's a slower moving branch, to be able to deploy it further. And if you hook this into the conversation we had yesterday with Jarv, when I was explaining how I actually want to deploy from a commit, right? This is where I want to remove that need for having a slower stable branch. I want to have master and like short branching when necessary. I want to branch out from this commit, fix whatever happens, right? Merge that into master, but have that head of that branch so I can deploy it to all of our environments so that we can continue deploying from master. And every time we have a bug of some sort, branch off the latest deployed commit, fix it there, deploy that fix, but then merge that back into master so that the rest of the master can continue being deployed further. That way, as soon as we start having some tooling for that, we can completely get rid of the, well, not completely. We can push the stable branch to the 22nd. Right? At the moment, we have the release done. At that point, we say, okay, and now we are going to backport security fixes, any sort of new bugs or so on that we see for the users, right? For the or self-managed users. Now we have this stable branch. That is a definitely slow running branch, as long as we support that release. And that branch now has its own separate life. Right now, the stable branch is not really a stable branch. It's just a slower moving branch of master, which makes very little sense. I wish I could visualize this properly. I can't, for the life of me, create a proper graph to explain this better.
I'm sure there's a way to do it. Another question I have is, what governs how many RCs we end up creating throughout the month?
Release candidates to deploy to gitlab.com, you mean?
Yeah.
RCs, so just to make this clear, so RCs are being built from the 7th till the 22nd. We are going to build as many as necessary. The amount of fixes that we need to port, the amount of new changes that are bringing in, all of them are mandating the number of RCs. So what I've been trying to push for a while now is that every day should have a release candidate. So every day we should create a release candidate, deploy it through our environments. And if something new happens, if we see a bug, create a new RC and go through the environments. As time progresses and all these exception requests and all of that, like QA is getting better and so on, we are seeing the need for less and less RCs.
Cool. Alrighty. Well, off the top of my head, I can't think of any more questions.
All right. That sounds good. I hope this was helpful to you.
Yes, very much so.
I will pause the recording here.